Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I have the distinct pleasure to have you. Oh, I, let me try to do something with the audio here. I, let me try. I, can you hear me well?
I can hear you well. Yes.
Okay. I think, yeah. I was getting. Oh no, now it's covered. I had the live session open on YouTube. That's why I was having the feedback on me. Sorry about that. I was going to say that I have a distinct pleasure to have here with me today Richard Sheridan from Menlo Innovations, and it's really a pleasure, Rich. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope we can give the people that will watch us either live today or maybe later on some interesting insights on how to lead with joy and create true agility. Um, I'd like to start by saying that when I ask some of my mentors and some of the leaders that I enjoy hearing from, what or which one would be a reference culture on agility, they always mention Menlo Innovations.
Nice.
Uh, and I know that you have been doing this for a while now, and you have a pretty mature culture in your organization. And I'd like to start exploring some of the aspects that made this possible. So, in your experience, how long have you been running Menlo? How long is it?
This year it'll be 22 years. We started in June of 2001, so we're almost 22 years old now.
So you basically started with the Agile Manifesto.
Yeah, in fact, we existed just before the manifesto was created. We were
That's
we were absolutely inspired by Kent Beck's book on extreme programming.
oh awesome! I have this book right here on my shelf, and
Those are
I really like that book too, especially because it has a chapter on lean, and for me was the first time that was clear that agile methods were a kind of implementation of the lean principles, and
yes.
can I ask you, you probably over these 22 years, you probably have experienced all of the waves of agility we had, and so in my understanding, we had several waves of agility. We could start with the extreme programming, people very centered in technical aspects of the code and building quality, building tests and things like that, and then we probably moved to Scrum, to lean startups, and then to scaling agility, managing technical debt, and all other waves of agility until we arrive to the what we call the business agility. And in your experience, what were the key success factors that made possible for a company like yours to not only to exist but to grow and to become a reference in agility?
Samuel, I would say we stepped outside of all those things you were talking about, and we didn't pursue any of them. We didn't try to be agile or lean or any of these things. What we wanted to do was solve big problems in the software industry. We
Hmm.
wanted to pursue what we now refer to as joy, the business
Right.
value of joy. And so what happened for us then was, it because we didn't pursue any particular one of those
Hmm.
methodologies or schools of thought, we could borrow from all of them.
Mm.
So we borrowed from extreme programming. We borrowed from design thinking. We borrowed from lean. We borrowed from the Project Management Institute, because we weren't looking at, we want to become certified in any particular one method
Hmm.
or anything like that. We were trying to solve big problems. What we wanted to do was design and develop great software. And all of those schools of thought have something to contribute to designing and building great software and great software teams. So we have borrowed from all of them.
That's awesome. And actually, that's one of the, I think, the best definitions of agility, which is to solve problems quickly and gracefully, as Joshua likes to mention. And when you started, well, I started more or less on the same period of time, probably a couple of years later, in 2003, when I had the first contact with lean and agile methods. But I was developing software for about 10 years already, so very involved in the chaos of software development. And I had the opportunity to, to experiment both sides of the coin. Before the agile methods in my life, we were really struggling to deliver on time, deliver the right quality to the customers. And then we discovered some practices that allowed us to improve quality, start to understand our capacity, and predict when we would be able to deliver things. If you mentioned, I believe that along these 22 years, you probably refined a lot your culture or habits, and what you do as a way of working. But in the first days of the organizations, where we didn't have agilists around, we didn't have agile coaches, neither scrum masters, what were the key practices that you would adopt to deliver faster and better value to customers?
Yeah, and I should tell a little bit of my personal history. I know when you and I have spoken in the past, we realized we had led parallel lives. I think I even jokingly said we must have been twins separated at birth,
Yeah.
because there were so many things that you and I both experienced early on in our career: the chaos, the bureaucracy, the broken quality, the missed deadlines, the blown budgets, the unhappy customers, all that sort of thing. So I think I'm a little bit older than you. So I had 20 years before we started Menlo living in that tortured world. In the last 2 years before we started Menlo, when I was a vice president of R&D, we were inspired by Kent Beck's book, Extreme Programming Explained. And there were so many elements of that made so much sense to me that we began implementing those things at my old company.
Mm-hmm.
Pair programming, back in those days, 2-week cycles, 2-week iterative cycles, planning game, working in a big open room together, test-driven design and development, automated unit testing frameworks. All of those things were experimented with rapidly in the 2 years before we started Menlo. And then the internet bubble burst in 2001, and all the worldly stuff that people measure, job title, paycheck, all those things, all gone. What they couldn't take away was what my co-founder and I had learned in those 2 years. And so when we started Menlo, we had a really unique opportunity. We were able to start on day one with pair programming, with open and collaborative workspace, with planning game, with daily stand-up, with test-driven design and automated unit testing frameworks, with continuous integration. So it was a delightful beginning. We didn't have to figure a lot of that early stuff out because we had those 2 years before we even started Menlo to start like on day one, just like that. So we had a really fortunate start in that regard.
That's very interesting. And you mentioned a lot of the practice. Well, you mentioned some of the management practice as well, but a lot of emphasis also on the engineering practice. By that time, with the experience you had trying to solve your own problems, I bet nobody else outside from the team was in there to kind of coach you. But you made your way through the rocks, and you've learned, and then you delivered the value to the customers. Usually, not really right on the first month, I say, but after a couple of years where you gained some experience with your teams. And usually, how long would you take, or maybe even today, how long usually you guys take to go from a kickoff meeting? Let's say that's the first meeting with the team and the customers to understand the needs, and then from then on, how long usually you guys take to deliver the first pieces of running software to the customer?
Yeah, our style is to deliver as quickly as possible, even something that is so basic as to be almost silly, right? And so the idea isn't so much that, well, we're giving our customer this piece of software and our expectation is they're then going to ship it to the market. That's a whole product management discussion that has little to do with us. We want to support that product management person so they can make their independent decisions, largely independent of the engineering team. But give you an example. We were working on a scientific instrument called a flow cytometer. And at the time we started the project, we weren't going to build the hardware, of course. And this is a very complex piece of scientific equipment. Our customer had one little circuit board that was literally on a piece of wood, a little piece of plywood. It had one light on it, an LED light, and it had a cable coming out of it that plugged into the computer. And our first delivery to that customer in the earliest cycle we went through was a simple 3-button screen: on, off, exit.
Connect and all the architecture.
Yep, that was it. We pushed the on button and the green light on the circuit board went on. We pushed the off button, the green light on the circuit board went off. That was all the application did. Sent a signal down that wire to the circuits on the board, turn the light on, turn the light off. We showed that in our first show and tell to our customer, and she got so excited. She was like, yay, this is awesome. And of course, we're thinking, this isn't much.
This is just a start.
We got a long way to go. And we looked at her and said, why are you so excited? She said, look, I've been doing this kind of work for a long time. I have direct evidence that my hardware team and my software team are actually communicating, collaborating, and working together.
Right.
She said a lot of times these kind of projects can go for months, sometimes years, before the hardware team and the software team start demonstrating they can communicate with one another. And she saw in that first cycle, that first 2-week cycle we did for a project, we were able to get a message from the computer to the board and have the board do something. And she wasn't excited about the technology. She was excited about the evidence that the humans, the hardware humans and the software humans, were actually communicating with one another.
Right. That's a really interesting story. I had been involved in product development where we had a hardware team as well, and we failed to reach that standard because actually software team would be much faster than the hardware team, and to provide fixes and adjust like the board and so on. Was so expensive and slow that the sponsor decided to cancel the project because it would, just take years to develop. And very, very interesting. I'm curious about one thing, and actually, I think this is probably everyone else's curiosity, which is the fact that you do everything that you do in pairs. These days, I even posted in a LinkedIn about that, and especially because I also had very interesting experiences with pair programming. And I remember one of them where we discovered that we had a interpersonal problem in the team because the teammates wouldn't rotate and wouldn't, pair with each other. Basically, when we introduced the pair programming to a team of 80 people, the team split itself in two, and they wouldn't, rotate. They would collaborate in a rotational way. And we know that this is important for pair programming. And you told me that you do this in every corner of the company, including in the administrative areas. So
Yes.
how does that work? What's the benefits that you see, and if you see any blockage or any impediment or difficulty, what is this also?
Yeah. So number one, everybody pairs at Menlo, and we switch the pairs every 5 days.
Every 5 days you are pairing with a different person.
Yes. And sometimes it's shorter, but it's never longer than 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And now, why do we do that? What was my basis for doing that back even pre-Menlo in 1999 to 2001?
Mm-hmm.
I had a serious problem on the teams I was leading. Every individual on the team was a tower of knowledge. Every individual on the team knew one part of a system and nobody else knew what they knew. It was absolutely hero-based development. And the only way to scale hero-based development is to scale the heroes. And the only way to do that is overtime. And tired programmers make bad software, and we didn't want to make bad software. So by switching the pairs every 5 days, two magical things happen. One is you're spreading knowledge across the team. You're getting that stereo perspective on problems from two different minds, two different experiences, so you get better results faster. A lot of people look at us, especially our potential customers, right? They come in and they take tours of Menlo. We have a lot of people come and visit, and they see the two people working together, and they ask us about it, and they're like, "Oh, that's really cool. What a great idea. Boy, I can see that." And then all of a sudden they think for their project, they're like, "Wait a minute. Do I have to pay for both of those people?"
That's always the question.
And I'm like, absolutely. And now they start asking deeper questions. Why do you do this? Why don't you split them apart? Wouldn't they go twice as fast? And the fact matter is, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I'm sure you've thought about this a lot yourself. Programming has never, ever been a typing speed contest. It's always a problem-solving contest. And there are so many different ways to solve a problem, and most of them are bad. You want to solve it well. Two people working together and then testing out their ideas with that next person that comes in. Because let's say you and I pair together for a week. When Christy comes in to pair with you next week, you're going to continue the work that you and I started. But what's Christy going to do? She's going to ask you questions about the code you and I thought was perfect. And you're going to look at it and go, "Hey, wait a minute, that isn't perfect." And then I might be sitting nearby because we're in a big open room. And all of a sudden you're like, "Hey, Rich, come here. We thought this was perfect last week. And Christy was with me for 5 minutes and she poked this big hole in our pretty beautiful logic." And the code gets stronger.
Mm-hmm. And the knowledge as well.
And this is the most beautiful thing. I did this once with a room of 200 programmers. I was at a conference and I had all these programmers in front of me. And I said, "Let me ask you a question. How many of you write maintainable code?" 200 hands went up in the air. Strong, confident, I write maintainable code. Then I asked them the next question. I said, "Raise your hand if you've ever met another programmer who writes maintainable code." And no hands went up.
Everybody was like a hero in itself.
And they're like, "Oh no, his code sucks and her code sucks. And I worked this other place and their code sucked." Like, because hero-based programmers can typically only maintain the code that they wrote themselves. And again, that's a really bad business model for software teams, especially these days. In 2001, it was important. Now it's critical. There are very few software projects that don't require lots of people working together. And if you're not sharing knowledge, if you're building these towers of knowledge, I can almost guarantee you that system is never going to get delivered.
Yeah. And other problems can be generated to the organization as well, like losing one of these heroes, right? So he takes the knowledge.
Losing could be as simple as they want to take a 2-week vacation. Right?
Yes.
They're not quitting you. They just want to go be with their family somewhere warm during the cold Michigan winters. Like, they should be able to do that.
It's enough to create a lot of problems already. Yes. People enjoying this great insight with pair programming from Marco Antonio. Very nice. Thank you for the feedback, Marco. Uh, so this is great, but I'm curious about. That's very understandable in the software sides of the business, but you mentioned that you do this in other areas. Everyone does that, right? So for sales teams or marketing teams or administrative teams, how does it work? Is it also good to them, or do they see any impediments for working like that?
Well, I will say everyone who joins Menlo on day one has to get their head used to this idea of sitting with another human being,
Okay.
right? And working together. This isn't come help me with my work. This is
Mhm.
our work done together. And of course, if you're used to not sharing, if you're used to, hey, leave me alone, I just want to get my work done, this is going to be an adjustment. And so we practice it every minute of every day, right? Because that's how people are working. And what they find, of course, is the same benefits you get from pair programming exist in other areas as well. So,
Mhm.
for example, when we're doing our accounting for tax season, when we're applying for a tax credit, these are complex forms that a simple number could end up causing you to have an audit from a taxing
Mhm.
authority, and those are no fun. Or when we're executing payroll, right? And how disastrous would it be if we mess up when we're delivering payroll? Um, in the place we are strictest about pairing is when we're writing production code.
Right.
We have very few rules at Menlo, but one of the strongest is you can't write a single line of production code without your pair partner there with you. You can
Oh.
you can maybe start some unit tests if your pair partner goes off to take a phone call. You can read some code and get ready. You could draw some pictures on a whiteboard to explain later to your pair partner. When your hands are going onto the keyboard to write production code, you've got to have your pair partner there with you. We view the code we write as too important. There's a lot of projects we work on that literally hold the lives of people in their hands. So we're very careful about that. The other roles, some pair very tightly. They're together all the time. Others pair a little more loosely.
Mhm.
And so our project managers tend to support each other through pairing, but they aren't necessarily paired every second of every day.
Right.
Although we are running an experiment on one project with that right now.
But
Intriguingly, I'm designing the curriculum for a new course we're going to teach based on my second book. And my team said, hey, Rich, we're going to pair people with you when you write the course. And I looked at him and said, what do you mean pair with me? I mean, I've got this. And they're like, no, we're going to give you a pair partner. And of course, what do I learn? Oh my gosh, the course is turning out so much better because I have these pair partners.
so
Even
you're drinking your own champagne.
yeah, and even this old guy can learn new tricks.
Surely, we are always learning, and really interesting. Another aspect that I like about extreme programming is that, oh, sorry, about the pair programming is that it helps to reduce the WIP, the work in progress, especially because you're tackling less features
Yep.
at a time. And I like the concept of building with integrity from scratch because you will always have at least two pairs of eyes looking to the same problem and try to improve in it, and also reducing the number of moving parts will probably improve the flow, right? Will speed up your throughput of value to customers. I really like these aspects. Um, another thing that I have heard about your culture, which is for me also interesting to talk about, is about the daily stand-ups. I know that you are doing that with probably most of your team altogether, and I've seen a few teams trying to do this, and usually when we have a lot of people, what I see is that some people tend not to pay attention when it's not their business that is being mentioned, and we may lose traction a little bit, and we may have longer stand-up meetings. How does it work for you when you what are the benefits, and again, what are the benefits and the pros and cons of doing this without the team?
Yeah, and I would say that a lot of things we do, Samuel, are purpose built for our type of business and the type of business we're in. So right now we probably have 15 different projects that are active right now with various numbers of people on each one. And we're pairing and switching the pairs. And over time, and this is not random, it's not willy-nilly, it's a very thoughtful process. Over time, people will migrate from one project to another. So they'll have worked on one project maybe for 4 to 6 months. Maybe they're getting a little tired of that project, or they hear about a new exciting project over here and they want to be part of that. So there will be this migration across projects over time. So in the course of a year, if you watch those 15 projects, almost everybody will have worked almost on every project. That isn't universally true, but it's pretty close enough for our discussion. Well, because of that, then, when we gather at Stand Up, if I was on the Harrison project last week, and this week I'm on the Matera project, I'm going to be listening for what's going on in the project I just left, because I have a lot of active information about that project. And I'm probably curious about how it's going. I knew where they were when I left. I knew what things they were pursuing. I understand what the customer's looking forward to seeing. So when the Harrison developers are reporting out at Stand Up, even though I'm not on that project anymore, I actually have a keen interest in what they have to say. I might even have something to contribute. Right. Because I have recent knowledge of that project, and I might hear them say something that's incorrect. And so in that way, that's why we bring the whole company together at Stand Up, because everybody really has an interest in all of the projects that are going on, because I don't know, maybe next week I'm going to be on that project. And so I should be paying attention. So I think it keeps people actively engaged. But even our 50-person stand-ups get done in 13 minutes. Most people are astounded that we can run a stand-up of 50 people inside of 13 minutes. And there's a whole bunch of reasons it goes that fast. But the number one reason it goes that fast is we don't solve problems at stand-up. We raise the problems, and if people can help us, if I said, hey, Samuel, I can help with that problem you're describing, your comment right at that moment is, great, Rich. See me after stand-up.
Right. And that's probably an amazing Kaizen tool, right? Because every day you find something to work on.
Right. Yep.
I really love the idea. I am curious about if you use any sort of like visual management tool for the entire portfolio to go from one project to another, or if you go around the circle with people. Do you have any sort of global portfolio management so that everybody sees what's going on?
Yeah, well, we do. We're a visual management oriented company, so we have these index cards pinned to the wall. We don't do stand up by the boards. If there is a project specific discussion that's needed just by the people on that, they might do that right after stand up and go immediately to their board and say, hey, let's look at the whole board for our project, that sort of thing. So this is more of a general report out on how everything's going on that project. But the way we keep stand up organized, which I think is very important, is and if you ever see any kind of graphic about Menlo or the books I've written, you will see a 2-horned plastic Viking helmet.
All right.
Right.
That's the token.
And that's our talking stick. And the reason we like the 2 horns is because we report out in pairs, which is another reason it goes faster, because each pair reports out together. Usually one person does most of the talking, but they each hold one of the horns. And then when they're done, they hand the Viking helmet to the next people, and it goes around the circle. So we know that's our visual management system for knowing everybody has spoken at stand-up.
That's really interesting. That you cut the time in half already just by doing this.
Yes.
And you know who is pairing with who, and I see a lot of benefits. Very, very interesting idea. Rich, I think that is really, for most of the cultures that I've seen in Brazil, and there are companies like yours who develop software for other organizations. they tend to see that doing pair programming the way you do is cutting productivity, or or having the customer paying twice, or those kind of thoughts. And of course, I think this is very disruptive to them. But I'm really excited and thankful that you came here to share your thoughts, because this has been working and for years, decades now, and you have a lot of people that use your company's culture as a reference of what's true agility. And I know that I like the way you position yourself as a chief joy officer of the company. And I'd like to share a quick story. I started developing software in 2000 in 1994. Before internet arrived in Brazil. Internet arrived in Brazil by the end of 1995, and of course, by back then was much harder. Everything was more difficult. We didn't have any way to find knowledge. We only through the books, and even the software development environments were very not so advanced by those days. So we don't have like advanced IDEs as we have nowadays in other facilities. And as time went on, I realized that software development was really a chaotic thing. And I remember that before I was introduced to the agile methods, I was working in a financial system. And our system used to integrate big companies like Coca-Cola, for example, with their banks. And we would transact really payments and receivements. And I remember once when a problem in one of our softwares prevented a payment of $5 million bill, 5 million reals, sorry, 5 million reals bill from Coca-Cola. They were paying one of their providers of bottles, and one day of not paying that could cause a crash for a small company, only for the interest in all the debts that this would generate. And I remember that by that time, nobody trusted nobody. What I mean by that is we wouldn't trust, as programmers, we wouldn't trust our bosses, our managers, because they would go too harsh on us, and they wouldn't trust that we would deliver on time. The customer wouldn't trust that we would deliver the right quality. Usually when we would deliver, we didn't use any of the engineering practices by the time that would help us to improve quality. Usually we would generate problems, and therefore the customer would ask us to get longer deployment cycles in trying to avoid that. And I remember once when I was working very hard in November. I worked 28 days in a row in that month. All the weekends from 8 a.m. to usually 11, sometimes 12. And I remember 12 p.m. And I remember once in a Friday that I was leaving the building at about 11 p.m. And I met the director of the company, and he asked me something like, "What are you doing?" And then I said, "Well, I'm going home now. It's the right time for that." Say, "Are you demotivated? Are you discouraged or something like that?" And then I said, "What?" he was kidding, he was making a joke,
Mhm.
but his joke was so hard on me because I was working hard the entire week, struggling to get something out. And I had creating problems with my own family because of that, and so on. And I've seen people from then on. I've seen people that would go burnout, would go in depression and other things, very very hard things. Um, and then I realized that that kind of environment wouldn't be good for health, for us, for human beings to work on. And then I realized that the first thing I would have to try to build was trust. But right alongside with trust comes joy,
Yeah.
because we need to enjoy what we're doing. We need to be happy. And I also remember one decade later, when I saw a talk from Linda Rising, and she was talking about positive emotions. So when you discovered that you'd have to work so hard to make people happy, what was the reason? Like, in my reason was this fact that I was working very hard, I was doing my best, and even though we were not being appreciated, it was hard. What was the spark that made you realize that joy would be the center of the thing?
Yeah, this will probably be a little bit of a long answer because there's multiple sides to it. The Number one, I really believe in this one simple sentence from W. Edwards Deming, where he said, all anyone asks for is a chance to work with pride. And the trouble is, if you are working 13 hours a day, 14 hours a day for 28 days straight, there is no chance for you to work with pride in that environment because you're tired, your brain is mushy and soft, you're making mistakes because you're tired, you're probably alone and isolated, you're straining family relations because you're spending so much time at work. And then, how often, I'd be curious if you've had the same experience as I have, that you've poured your soul into that project only to have the company at some point say, hey, Samuel, just want to let you know the project you've been working on the last 6 months, we've canceled it. And it's not going to ship ever. But don't worry, we have a new project lined up for you.
And you devoted yourself to the thing.
Yeah. And so I think there was a time where some of those leaders that I worked for simply believed that all I wanted to do was come in and move my fingers on keyboards. That as long as my fingers were moving on keyboards, I must have been happy. And I realized that no, that is not where joy comes from for software engineers. There is only one thing that produces joy for software people, one thing alone. And I think this is true of most engineering professions. We want to see our work get out into the world and delight the people it's intended to serve, so much so that those people who use the work of our hearts, our hands, and our minds come back to us, find out that we're the ones who worked on this thing they're using, and thank us and say, I love that thing you created. You are so lucky to be able to work on things like that. I would never know how to do what you do, but wow, this is amazing. You've made my life better because of what you've done. I began to realize in the midpoint of my frustration part of my career, there are so few people, so few programmers in our industry that ever get to experience that feeling, that it just starts to feel normal. That back in the 80s and early 90s with Microsoft products and their blue screens of death and people saying, just ship it, we'll fix it later, and later never came. It just started to feel, well, that's just the software industry. That's the way it's got to work. And I'm here to tell you, after 22 years of joy, it does not have to be that way. You can work with pride. What I appreciated most about Kent Beck's book, a sustainable work pace. Because the projects we work on, many of the projects we work on here at Menlo, they go on for years. There's no way to do a years-long project with Samuel working 13 and 14-hour days with weekends and all that. It's just not possible. So what if we created a sustainable work pace? Again, for me, what I see as a sustainable workplace is crafted by this pairing and repairing constantly. Why? Because if somebody says, hey, I want to go on a vacation, we haven't built a singular dependence on them. If a customer comes to us, like when we just had one lately who said, you guys got to go faster. Well, you know what we do? We add more people and we can go faster. Why? Because if we have 4 people on a project and suddenly the project needs to go twice as fast. We put 4 more programmers in, split the original 4 across those 4 pairs, and within a couple of weeks, we're producing twice as much output as the original 4 were with the same 40-hour work week.
Mhm. Of course, the customer would pay more for that, right?
Oh, really? Yeah, they want to go faster. They want to get more done. They have to pay more. I mean, I think it's funny how somehow software got put in some realm where somebody began to believe that software is not a human activity. And the fact of the matter is, software, like every other industrial activity, involves effort and real people working real hours to produce real output. It's just plain and simple. You want more done, there's going to be more hours. You're going to pay more. That's all there is.
Right. But on the other hand, your cost of delay will diminish, right? You're gonna get your value out earlier, which
Well,
is
look, the worst outcome for a software project in terms of ROI is 0 users. I don't care how elegant the software is. I don't care how beautifully designed it is. If no one ever uses it, no value whatsoever.
true. True. I really like what you described, Rich, because that remembers me that the beauty of life is to enjoy the journey, not the destination. Not only the destination, right?
Right.
And I am a motorcycle rider. I love to go farther with my motorcycle, and but better than arriving at the destination and realize that the other day is the time to come home, is to enjoy the journey. And sometimes when we struggle to to do as fast as possible something that may not even be used, as you said, I had this kind of situations where I was not so long, but we spent some months on it, working very hard, and then the manager came back and said, well, you know what, it was not really this that the customer wanted,
Yeah.
so let's change the direction. So, and instead of collecting requirements, transmitting them to the team somehow, and then having them to deliver, involving everybody and enjoying the journey, everybody, I think this is really great stuff.
Yeah.
uh,
And that's, and I will say, Samuel, in terms of the evolution of software practices and what was happening in the beginning of extreme programming and agile, the entire notion of an iterative and incremental approach to software was one of the greatest benefits we got, because now, if we do it right, we can invite the business sponsors and the customers to see the earliest versions. Because guess what? In those early versions, somebody might say, "Oh, is that what you thought we meant? No, 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 no. That's not what we meant at all." You find that out 3 weeks in, you're good. We'll make an adjustment. You find that out 3 years in,
that's a huge problem.
huge problem.
Yes, I think that's the beauty of agility, and I really love it. um, I don't know what to, to how to say this, Rich, but I really love the way you explore these subjects and this practice, putting people all together, creating this collaborative environment, having everyone understand the purpose and how we work. I understand that if you are hiring new people that have never been at Menlo before, and nowadays it's even harder because the market is changing, pandemic has changed a lot of stuff, people is changing, we have a lot of newcomers coming into the market with different mindsets. And I think at least in my understanding, the way we think agility today in somehow is distorting what agility really is, because agility, in my understanding, is creating this environment where people are happy most of the time, and they work hard to deliver faster and better value sooner to the customer. And But sometimes what I've seen recently is that we are putting the methods as an end goal, not really
Right.
make the customer
Yes.
happy.
Yeah. Right. We're making agility the purpose of our organization as opposed to the structure and the way of thinking. Yep.
Exactly, and I think this is the one of the things that I would like to emphasize, because really the goal of agility is to deliver value faster and better and sooner to the customer, and be happy along the way, right?
You know, I'll give you a this morning example of exactly what you're talking about. We're passing the Viking helmet around stand up, and it gets to Chris, one of our senior programmers here. And he says, "Hey, I just want to call out the team." He says, "The whole team, because of what we've created here at Menlo, we could solve a problem this morning that the customer project I'm working on, we code name all of our projects. So he was working on the Florence project. And the Florence customer came to us and said, "Hey guys, we really, really need this extra feature in by next week. It's really important that we do that." Typically, when those kind of requests come into any kind of software team, it means overtime. It means the weekend. It means maybe an all-nighter. What did we do? We reorganized the team this morning to take a pair off of one project that was ahead of schedule and could suffer the loss of that pair, and move them over to the Florence project. So then we essentially doubled the size of the Florence project team, just like that. And one of our developers was calling out thanks to the team for how that made him feel to be able to deliver that kind of value to our customer on kind of a moment's notice without even thinking twice about it. We had the agility to make that kind of change in our organization without anybody thinking it was weird or odd or a bizarre request. It's like, nope, we're going to move another pair over to the Florence project just for today, maybe today and tomorrow, depending on what they need. And we'll slow another project down because we knew the relationship that client would allow it.
And that's what I call the true agility. Decisions made fast, and people happy with it, because depending on the culture or the organization you are, people will say, "Oh, that's not my responsibility."
And,
I,
and,
I
and guess where the CEO found out about all this? At stand up.
right.
I had no idea this was going on. This is a pretty small team in one big open room. I sit in a room with everybody else, and all this is happening organized by the team.
So if you ask if there is value in the stand-up meetings, there you have an example
Absolutely.
of how valuable it can be, right? Rich, a last question for you, and I think leadership is a very important aspect of any organization, right? So when we form a team, we understand that agile teams are self-organized, but that doesn't mean that they don't have leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in your case, is it possible that a person that is a leader in one project could not be a leader in another one? And then how you do with this leadership thing? Do you rotate leadership? How does it work for you?
So the team actually self-organizes this as well. Our assumption is that everyone on this team has some amount of leadership ability, right? And for younger, newer team members, it might be here. And then as you grow and stay with the team for a while, that grows. We are an unusually organized company. We don't have any bosses here, which, a lot of people would say that won't work. And it's worked for us for 22 years. So I can assure you it works. It's got its own weird, quirky outcomes every now and then. But what we do have, as you said, are leaders. Bosses can tell you what to do. Leaders have to influence your behavior. Leaders have to use stories. They have to use rational, reasonable arguments with others to say, hey, I think we should do this. And so we're cultivating that leadership all the time. And what we see is, and here's an example. So this is probably the craziest example that just happened this week. And I I'll be a little careful not to put too much weight on this example, but it is the type of thing we do here. So there's a new, so we have these roles, we have these fun roles in our team that are called high-tech anthropologists. So I'll say that one more time because it's a mouthful. High-tech anthropologists. They are not our programmers. They are design thinkers. They're the ones doing discovery. They're the ones going out in the world and studying users in their native environment, learning about what the goals and vocabulary and all that sort of thing are. And they will ultimately, at some point in their process, design the screens that the programmers will then go implement.
These are not the developers, though, right?
No, the developers.
Okay.
Yep. Now, we have had some developers that can play that role, can wear that hat, but a lot of our developers would prefer to have somebody else do that work. So Shelby just joined our team this week. She is interviewing with us. We have an unusual interview practice. She's coming to Menlo every day for 3 weeks, and we are paying her for that. But she knows it's a 3-week paid trial. So she is essentially auditioning with our team. And so she comes in and she pairs with another anthropologist. Well, we started this new project for a fairly prominent company here in town. I looked at the schedule so I could see where Shelby was working. She was going to be on this project over the course of 5 days. And over the course of those 5 days, she was going to be paired with 3 different high-tech anthropologists during the course of the week. She was the constant. So she's the one who's carrying the information from pair to pair for this important client project. We are asking her to lead, even though she's brand new. She is learning our system. And this isn't a trial by fire. This isn't like sink or swim because we want the project to succeed. We want the customer to succeed. So the interesting element that grows leaders here is this simple idea that the job of your pair partner is to help you look good, help your pair partner succeed. So we're building in these leadership qualities right from day one. Shelby's learning she's never going to be left alone. She's never going to be left to hang out to dry. She's never going to be able to make a mistake that her pair partner won't sign up for and say, we made that mistake. It wasn't Shelby's mistake. And so we're teaching Shelby in her first week here. She hasn't even joined us as a full-time employee yet. In her interview process, we're teaching her how to lead.
That's amazing. I think it's really great because you kind of, as you said, you trial people and you also make your team understand if that people will fit your current culture, right? So you don't hire and then say, oh, this is your new colleague, work with it.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. And I used to say we hired for culture fit, but then I saw the eclectic group of people we gathered here and I thought, what's really going on? And what's going on here isn't hiring for culture fit. What we're doing is teaching our culture to others and setting reasonable, rational expectations for human beings. And guess what? Human beings are incredibly adaptable creatures. You might even say human beings themselves are agile creatures. You set clear expectations for them and they adapt.
That's incredible. And I think last thing that I'd like to mention is putting this all together. You created a very unique culture, right? It's probably will not be found anywhere else in the world. I think you created it's an example. It's a reference. I think it's challenging because for most people, I believe that this would be hard to implement, at least with their mindsets or maybe with their current structures. But you prove that this is all possible. So I think it's all great. And thank you so much, Rich, for all these insights, for sharing with us. Would you like to come to Brazil someday? Maybe we could try to arrange something.
I've been to Sao Paulo. I have not been to your beautiful area of the country, so I would love to come visit someday.
I know there are people that would like to join, like Joshua said something, then Larsen as well. Maybe we could try to arrange something just to get together and spread these ideas. I think this is great. Um, and last points, you told me once that most of your people work face to face in the office, right? So you don't have a pretty much like a remote first culture.
No, we don't. Of course, we did during the pandemic for about two
Hmm.
and a half years. We were essentially 98% remote, but we were very clear with the team. There are concrete benefits to being in a room together. Just had one the other day. There was a pair working over here, and they were working on a project, one of our projects, and another pair nearby working on a completely different project. But of course, because we switched the pairs, Chris on that project overheard the conversation between the two programmers on project A. And he said, "What did you say? You said you're going to delete system 32? Do not delete system 32." And I was right nearby and I laughed. I said, "See, this is why we need to be in the room together, because that won't happen when we're remotely paired or we're isolated." Because, oh, I can connect to people. What we like to say about our culture is help arrives without it even being asked for. Chris overheard what they were going to do and said, "Hey guys, I want to throw in a message here. I want to just tell you, you don't want to be doing that. You can't do that with Slack. You can't do that with Zoom. You can't do that with Google Meet. Being in close proximity to one another has great benefits." Now, did we learn some flexibility during the pandemic? Absolutely, we did. I would say on any given day, about 80% of us are in the room, but almost every pair has at least one person in the room who can be that person that overhears their peers.
Right. That's amazing. Once again, you are breaking paradigms here. Thank you so much, Rich. And I really enjoyed the conversation, really insightful, inspiring. And I hope we can stay connected. And anything that I could be helpful or useful for our organization, please, will be really a pleasure. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Samuel. And I look forward to meeting my twin brother someday in person.
Let's do that then. Cheers.
All right. Take care.